The metaverse is emerging as the next big technology platform and promises to be the next frontier for human experiences on the internet. Into the Metaverse covers companies, technologies, and trends that are bringing these promises to life. Join creator and host Jonathan Ross Friedman, founder and CEO of Super Social, as he interviews the brilliant minds that are building, shaping, and investing in the metaverse.
Welcome to Into the Metaverse. I'm so excited to have Charlie Fink on the show today. I'm going to let Charlie introduce himself because he's a man of so many different things. But I came to know Charlie quite recently, for a longer time as the author of a successful newsletter on Forbes that covering XR, VR, Metaverse, etc. But we met and had a wonderful brief chat at South by Southwest earlier this year. And we've continued the conversation. And I thought, how wonderful would it be to actually put you, Charlie, on the other side of the table, on the guest front. And I'm so delighted that you have a chance to join me today for the show.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks for the invitation. It was great to meet you at South by, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you and Super Social better. I do write a weekly column in Forbes for Forbes Technology and Innovation, and I cover, as you said, XR, AI, and the metaverse. So that's, of course, how we met, because Super Social is one of the more successful metaverse companies, and it's a brand new company, and you saw the opportunity, at a great moment when things were just starting to pick up momentum. So you rode that wave and built a marketing company for a new world and a new demographic, and one that is growing. The post-pandemic slowdown notwithstanding, Roblox and Fortnite are where the eyeballs are. My criticism of Hollywood recently has been they looked at these platforms like they were there for marketing and not the thing itself.
That's a good point that I want to double click on. But before we go so deep, take us a moment back, okay? When did it all start for you? Your curiosity, your passion, your excitement. You also wrote a book. So for those who do not by accident know who Charlie Fink is, tell me a bit about the history and the genesis of how you got into all of this, into all of this industry.
Okay, so let me see if I can reel the story back and start with, I went to art school and I was interested in independent filmmaking. And when I got out of art school, I started working on Hollywood films that were being shot in Chicago, where I went to school, and eventually got a job offer 2 years later from Gary Marshall and Alex Rose, who had been in Chicago making a film called Nothing in Common with Tom Hanks and Jackie Gleason. Nobody listening to this podcast probably remembers who Jackie Gleason was. And it would be too digressive for me to go into 1950s television show called The Honeymooners. And I think
we know the second half. Tom Hanks, everyone knows.
Yeah. So and from there, I got a job at Disney, and I was at Disney for 10 years. And I worked in animation. I worked on The Lion King very early on. I'm kind of famous because I called it Bambi in Africa and ran around pitching it all over the studio to get some momentum behind the project early on. So, and for my sins, they made me the youngest vice president at the company at the time. But that's, now we're back at 1989. So I went from animation to live action. In live action, I was responsible for a movie called Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey, which turned out to be a monster franchise for the Disney Pictures and the studio, the family side of the studio. From there, I went into a project called Virtual that was being led by Tim Disney and the famous game designer Jordan Weissman, who was just inducted into the AWE Hall of Fame. And we were working with cab-based simulation in retail settings. So when I say cab-based simulation, I mean flight simulators. But instead of getting you together in the sky where it's hard to find other people, you're in a giant mech in an arena. And the people in the other mechs are your friends, and you've got an intercom and you're trash talking other people. And the game was called BattleTech. It went on to be a huge hit for Activision, huge console game, PC game. Jordan, eventually the company, that particular company was sold off I went to AOL, so I became an early AOL executive. And Jordan went to Microsoft and became one of the original creative directors for Xbox. So I went to AOL. They loved me because I was an ex-Disney guy. And, I had a great run there. That's how come I can afford to be a writer today, because
So these are these are the prime days of AOL.
Yeah, AOL was the NVIDIA of the late 90s, right? I mean, so it was unbelievable to have stock options. But I also got very lucky because I left AOL in 99. I did a startup that was purchased by American Greetings or right before the crash. And I worked for American Greetings for 4 years. I was their president and chief creative officer of AmericanGreetings.com. And while I was there, we acquired Blue Mountain, which was also very popular, because sending e-cards was very popular in the late 90s and early aughts. And so I rode that wave, but when they bought my company, I mean, for a lot of money. So, eventually my obligations to them waned and I was able to leave the company. And I wanted to do creative things and entrepreneurial things. So I started a internet marketing company that did very early affiliate marketing deals using Google AdWords. That was a time when it wasn't that friendly to small companies. So we helped a lot of companies with their AdWord marketing, including eBay. But again, when in 2008, after the downturn there, the first thing people turn off in a downturn is advertising. So the other thing I was doing is I was working on producing Broadway shows, right? I wanted to do something creative. I wanted to get back to the entertainment business. But after doing that for like 7 or 8 years, I was like, this sucks. I chose this job for myself, but it's not that creative. It's mostly begging for money. And putting your own money into these freaking projects. It's impossible to break through all the noise. There's 42 Broadway shows that you're competing with. So in the end, I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I want to get back into tech. Okay, so this is like 2015. But guess what? I'm an ex-CEO who hasn't been relevant for 10 years. And there's just no way. And people are like, well, you should be a consultant. And, I'm like, consult on what? What do I know? I know how to lose money on creative projects, and I would love to get back into a big tech company, but there's just no way. There was no way back. So then I ran into Gary Vaynerchuk, who I had known from AOL when he ran Wine Library. It's a 16-year-old kid. And I said, oh my God, I love your book. Yeah, I'd love to write a book someday. I'm not quite sure what it's about. And he goes, well, where's your blog? How's that going? I'm like, my blog? He said, well, how are you going to write a book if you don't have a blog? And so he sent me to Medium and I started writing in 2015. And I wrote about everything that I knew about. I wrote about social media because e-cards was early social media. Email was early social media. We used email the way we use texting today. So I started writing. Nobody was interested in anything that I had to say about politics or movies or theater or Disney or anything. No interest at all. And then I ran into Brian Biniak, who was an old friend who I'd worked with probably 20 years, 15 years before at American Greetings. And he said he was running VR, this giant VR project for Honda. And he said, haven't you heard what's going on? Facebook just bought Oculus. They're investing billions of dollars. You were Mr. AOL. You were Mr. VR in the 90s. That's what you should be writing about. And I kind of laughed it off, right? Because it had been so long ago, 20 years ago. And I said to my wife, Brian thinks I should be writing about VR. And she said, well, you're not getting very far writing about what you want to write about. Maybe you should write about what somebody else thinks you should write about. I kind of shrugged it off, but as I thought about it, I thought, well, let me just go do a bunch of research and really figure out what's going on. I got exposed to mixed reality and augmented reality, which was an idea that had never occurred to me, that you could use your phone and your camera in that way. And it did open up for me tremendous curiosity about how all this was going to play out. And by the way, I was even talking about AI agents then, which is why AI is part of my beat. Of course, I couldn't imagine what ChatGPT was going to become.
No one could.
I really did
No one
not
could.
I knew that ChatGPT existed, and I knew some people who were using it, but I truly did not understand what was about to happen in 5 years. Otherwise, I would have bought more NVIDIA. So,
But the interesting thing, Charlie, yeah, we would have all wanted to buy more NVIDIA by now. But the interesting thing, I was just reading this morning, actually, to your point about just the time things take. And I just saw this week that Fei Li, right, one of the greatest scientists in AI, she created the ImageNet in 2010, 2011, which really ushered a whole new era of image recognition and AI related to images. She just now founded a company that in a matter of months reached $1 billion valuation from investments. And, she's been one of the earliest 14 years ago, right? So no one knew how fast things can go. Some people, it happened so fast, but it's actually been taking decades to get to where we are.
So to wind up the story, I write a ridiculously long story about where VR, AR, and AI seem to be going, and it gets more hits in 24 hours than the previous 15 stories put together. So it's a huge dopamine hit. So I wrote another article about VR, and the same thing happened. And it kept happening because somehow in that moment, my voice was welcomed into that conversation. And then the phone rang, and it's Louis Dvorkin, the chief creative officer of Forbes, who was following me on social media because at AOL, we had been acquaintances. He was a subordinate of a colleague of mine, and we knew each other casually. He was a nice guy who had been in the news business for decades. And so he says, we need somebody to cover VR who's not a game guy. And I said, okay. He said, and we're going to pay you. And then the managing director called me, and then they hired me. I got bounced over to the tech editor. And I said, listen, I'm not an engineer. I've been out of VR for a while, so you'll have to bear with me. And she goes, I wouldn't worry about that. If you write for Forbes, you are an expert, and you'll become one pretty quickly. And that's exactly what happened. Right. I mean, you just write about it and talk to people and follow the news. And, that ignited a curiosity in me. And then a publisher approached me because I was writing about VR at Forbes and persuaded me for basically no money to write a book. And I said, if the book is AR enabled, I'll do it. And so, you read the book with a phone in your hand, and there are markers all through the book that bring up, entertaining animation. And when it was released in 2017, it was a huge bestseller, which is nuts for a paper book about computers. So the book now is basically free on Amazon. I think it's $10 or on Amazon or on the website. And if you have Amazon Unlimited, I think it's free. But it's nobody has a lot of use for a 7-year-old computer book. But because of that book, I got a teaching job. Because I got that first teaching job, I got another teaching job. I teach in the ASU graduate program that's led by Nani De La Pena in downtown LA, and at Chapman University in Orange County, because I'm based in Los Angeles. So that's what I've been doing for the past 8 years. I've been writing about XR, and since 2022, a lot more about. I have a podcast that I do with is really famous Ronnie Abovitz, the founder of Magic Leap, and Ted Shilowitz, who used to be futurist for Paramount Global and Viacom. But of course, when you're the futurist for a company that has no future. So
I mean, there's so much to unpack. Well, first of all, thanks for sharing your background in Genesis. I think it's so great to, first of all, for me personally, to just get a recap on your background. So many things that I actually didn't know you've done in your past, but in a way, all kind of connected as you've ventured through tech and internet and entertainment and some pretty iconic companies like Disney, AOL, and Forbes. So congrats on what is obviously a really cool journey.
Yeah. I don't take pleasure in my own accomplishments. I always want the next success. I always want the next thing.
Yeah, I think I suffer from that same from that same bug. Just keep focusing on what's next. Where do we go forward? no time to look at the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
I saw someone on Instagram, he said, there is a reason why our front shield in the car is much bigger than the rear view, so
Yeah.
kind of makes sense,
There
right?
you go.
So Charlie, I'd love to start with something that I start with everyone who come on the podcast. To you today, what is the metaverse?
Interconnected 3D virtual worlds. And then you can add on to that definition whatever else you want, depending on who you are and what your interest is. I think one thing about the metaverse that certainly the conversation has excavated is its dubious relationship with virtual reality.
Well, I think there is actually, when people talk about the metaverse, and especially in the last 2 years, I think we went through this sort of interesting journey where there is, okay, let's talk about the metaverse as outlined in Neil Stephenson's book, and as people write about this interconnected network of virtual world in 3D, real time, etc. And then we had the Web3 phenomena, and everyone talks about, well, actually, the metaverse is a user-owned internet, and it doesn't have to be 3D. Then that kind of went away, and then AI came in, and now there's like metaverse is kind of a no-go, and actually Apple just calls it spatial internet or
Correct.
spatial computing. But in my mind, and I'd love to hear your perspective, and this is what I kind of try and educate myself and others, is these are all actually connected, right? Do we think the internet should be something that drive prosperity to more people? 100%. Do we think the internet is evolving to a 3D environment, real time, powered by game engines? And are we at the very beginning of that? Yes. Is AI contributing to that? And is AI important to the evolution of a 3D internet? 100%. But I'd love to hear from you, as someone who has really been writing and covering this area for 7-8 years now. How does all the dot connects to you, or maybe they don't?
The definition of the metaverse, let's go to Matthew Ball, I just read the revised edition of his metaverse book, which came out in 2022. And he was talking about the metaverse in 2020, 2021, before Meta ever changed its name.
Mm-hmm.
Ball is a former Amazon strategy executive turned venture capitalist. And he runs a ETF with it's called the Round Hill Ball Metaverse Fund. And into that bucket, he has put 50 companies that have something to do with this concept of the metaverse. But his concept is very broad. For the metaverse he envisions of these interconnected 3D virtual worlds, none of them an island, right? So it's like the Ready Player One movie. You walk from one virtual world into another without any friction, right? And you carry from one world to your money and your identity. So that's what Ball is thinking, right? So he buys a lot of chip companies. He has, companies that do, big data like Planeteer, AMD, NVIDIA, Microsoft, everybody who has something to do with a very broad conception of the metaverse, whether it's on the hardware layer or on the software layer or the consumer or business side. So those are the 50 stocks he has in that bucket. So you can conceive of the metaverse as this large ongoing effort to upgrade the internet, because the internet was built for voice communication and asynchronous email communication. It wasn't built to be a massively multiplayer 3D interconnected 3D world. So you have to rebuild it with that in mind, fixing all the things that you did in building the internet that is preventing it from happening, because that's 40-year-old legacy infrastructure. So before you can have the metaverse as Ball envisions it, you have to have some massive development of technology and hardware technology. So I think that's going to take decades, really. In fact, that's an effort that's never going to end. So that's Matthew Ball's metaverse. But I don't think, as I said, I think this is decades away, and he acknowledges as much. I think what's happening, so what happens between now and that very far away? Because that's relevant to us, right? That's relevant to your company. And what's going to happen is metaverses, plural. And I know Ball hates when I say metaverses, and I start big arguments with people, but that is realistically the world we're going to live in for a while. Is Call of Duty a metaverse? It is. Come on. It doesn't have everything that Ball includes in the definition, but it is not. Fortnite is not. Roblox is not. a bad way to start thinking about spatial worlds. And so, and of course, the young people who are the primary users of those platforms will take that familiarity and that expectation of being on a 3D internet with them as they get older and as they start using the internet in more diverse ways. So there's a long-term trend to quote unquote a spatial internet. But I think in the short term, the metaverse as we understand it is going to be driven by these 3D virtual worlds. There are many of them, starting with Second Life, which is the granddaddy of all social immersive worlds. But what Epic did with Fortnite was they took that idea and they remade it again for a new gaming audience, for a mobile gaming audience. And when it came out, there weren't that many good video, action video games, and it was freaking free. Their strategy was brilliant. So and Roblox similarly, and that guy, what's his name, Bazuski is
Dave Baszucki.
Yeah, Dave Baszucki is a visionary. I thought he was like running a little game site for years. I had but I wasn't I'm not a gamer, so I didn't get it. But the conversation about the metaverse, forced me into Roblox, and then I was like, oh shit, this is the metaverse.
Yeah, Charlie, and I mean, you're not alone. I mean, I can tell you, even when I started Super Social in early 2020, I had a couple of slides in my investor deck. I literally had to explain what is Roblox to people, because people they knew, like you, but they thought for many years, oh, it's this place where kids build some stuff for other kids.
Right, exactly. That's what I thought.
Right? Yeah, that's totally fine. Even when Roblox went public in 2021, USA Today wrote, Roblox, the app for kids, right? Not a platform, not a metaverse, not even like a UGC, the app for kids, right? Even in 2021, people in the media were still writing about Roblox as the app for kids.
In fairness to my colleagues, most of the users, the demographics of Roblox are under 21. So if you're the Wall Street Journal, that's kids.
That is true. If you take it to the demographic,
and of course you have all these commercial brands and clients that you're helping reach that demographic. So you are more familiar than most about who is there and the best ways to reach them.
Certainly, and I think there's a lot we can talk about that, because I do think brands always played an important role in popularizing technology.
This is again, when I was talking about media companies missing the boat, look at the amount of money brands are spending directly on influencers. The network used to be the middleman, right? You want to buy advertising, you want to be associated with these celebrities, you got to go through us, right? But 100%. Now the brands are like, oh, I want to have a relationship with the celebrity. What's their phone number? I'm going to email them. And I'm going to go into business with them directly. I don't need you in the middle.
Yeah. Anymore. And look, it's been years and decades of middlemen. I'm just reading now the biography of Ted Turner, and it's just interesting to read the story of how he built CNN and the whole, going back to like why TV was such a revolution for businesses and brands and advertising. And look, it's happening now. And I think to your point, the metaverse in its full incarnation is most likely decades away, if at all, right? If at all. And I do think Matthew Ball has been doing a great job articulating that broader vision on what are all the key components that need to happen in order to reach that metaverse. But to your point, today, we have a network or a collection. I wouldn't say a network. We have a collection of all kind of virtual world platforms. Roblox is obviously the largest of them. Fortnite is growing in popularity and becoming a bigger platform with the integration into Unreal Engine. And there is the famous tweet from Tim Sweeney, who says, someone asked him on Twitter, what is Fortnite? And that was in 2019, I think. And he said, Fortnite is a game, but ask me again in a year. Right? And so he kind of had that vision of where he wants to take the platform, and it's still very early days. But here's the thing that is most fundamental, Charlie, that I think is exciting. And I'll use a quote to kind of preface my perspective. There is a learning scientist called Alison Gopnik who writes about science of childhood and kids. And there is a quote in one of her books. She says, children are the R&D department of the human species, which is such a
That's
foundational, amazing quote,
Yeah,
right?
it's such
What
a
a
good
great
quote.
quote, right? And so to me, Roblox is absolutely about young people. Fortnite as well. All of these platforms are all about young people. But guess what? This is the generation that is going to consume the next era of the internet. And what I think I'm trying to get people to understand is that when people talk about avatars, the way Jan and Charlie use avatars is absolutely irrelevant. The way 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 8-year-olds are using avatars is fundamental to the way the internet is going to look like. And I think this is where we're going. It's a change of human behavior on the internet as much as it is a technological shift. So I'd love to kind of pick your brain and your perspective on the transformation that is happening with the way young people are using the internet, and what does it actually mean about the future of the internet?
We have been conducting a 20-year experiment on what happens to kids when they are raised on the internet. You're a little bit younger than me, but I imagine you are part of that first generation, like my kids, who were growing up in the 90s when the internet was first happening, and they had AOL, and they had
ICQ,
Messenger, and they had internet porn traps, and they had the whole thing, including early Call of Duty, which was what they did a lot on their computers, aside from filling them up with viruses from going to porn sites. So your generation sort of was the guinea pigs on computers. And I don't think, looking at you or looking at my son, first of all, you guys have jobs that no one could have imagined 10 years ago, right? My son is a golf instructor, but he became a celebrity on Instagram because of his entertaining style.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna send him to my father-in-law, who is a big golfer.
At Dave Fink Golfs. So he's the pot smoking, long-haired golf instructor for the people, who curses like Dennis Leary. So if you want Dennis Leary as a golf coach, Dave is your man. But he was trained as an actor, so he's combining his love of sports with his natural tendency to perform. And
Very cool.
I mean, he's writer, director, performer, editor, distributor,
full stack creator.
Yeah, and exactly. He's a full stack creator, and he works directly with brands. The brands pay him. That's how he makes money. That and selling advertising on YouTube. But he sells the sponsorships are the most valuable thing. So he's got a club sponsor. He's got a putter sponsor.
That's amazing.
Anyway, and your job and your whole company didn't exist either, because 10 years ago, Roblox was a bunch of kids building games for each other, right? Because the mobile era put a rocket sled under so many companies, and Roblox was one of them.
100%. And
but also true of Fortnite. So this is the next generation after yours. I don't think it did your generation that much damage, but then came my daughter's generation, and she had a smartphone and was messaging with her friends when she was 10. And so I think that generation is the generation that's gone through all the crazy shit with Instagram and cyberbullying and all the things that were kind of dangerous or potentially dangerous with mobile became actually dangerous to kids' self-esteem, dangerous to kids, a lot of young males, like the Trump shooter, are basically these incel outcasts without hope.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And actually, I think the virtual world,
the media and technology world that you and I live in helped create those people. Right. Yeah. That is the unintended consequence of all these changes.
Yeah. And it doesn't help that in the United States, everyone can access, ammunition whenever they want and how they want.
That is not something I am in favor of. And it also creates an authoritarian atmosphere for the police, because they're afraid every person they're interacting with has a weapon. And it's funny, because I did a ride along with sheriffs about 7 years ago for a Forbes story on simulation and training. And they have a big simulator for the LA Sheriff's Department, which, by the way, is the largest police organization in the world because they have 35,000 miles to patrol, square miles to patrol. And so they have 35,000, it's a 35,000 person organization. It's almost as big as the entire state National Guard.
Wow.
And
that's
so
just the LA, this is the LAPD?
This is the Sheriff's Department. LAPD
Sheriff's
is just
Department.
LA City. This is the rest of Southern California.
Got it.
And so I'm going through these simulations with them, and everybody's got a gun, and everybody is drunk or high. And I'm like, how come everybody you deal with is drunk and high and has a gun? And the guy goes, well, that's who we deal with. We get called for a drunk and high person, and yeah, they probably have a gun.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and this is a whole different conversation and a whole different podcast.
I know I got going. This is a tech podcast, and really, I think that the point that we're making here is that it is a very different world. The kids who are playing these games are very different from you, and very different from my kids, and they see the world in a different, or I should say, they see a different world and have a different perspective than we have or our kids have, because their world has a digital dimension to it, which is bigger and has more reality to it and has more of an effect directly on the real world than anything you fucked around with or my kids fucked around with. So, we're escalating the unintended consequences. We really don't know what's going to happen, but I think that the mental health problems that are arising because of the increased digitization of the world are concerning. It's not going to stop us. I mean, the one thing I have learned is that you're not going to stop technological progress. This idea that we're going to tame and control AI is kind of laughable, but okay, people feel like they need to do that, but you're not going to stop it.
Technology has always been deterministic. It doesn't stop. It doesn't care what we think. And by the way, technology is people. People, humanity, human beings, we are relentless in the pursuit of advancement. It will never stop. This is part of why we're here.
And let's be clear, there's greed involved here.
100%.
AI agents is a $1 trillion category that is just emerging. And so who's competing? The biggest companies in the world, of course.
Yeah. And to close the loop on this wonderful quote I shared with you earlier, right? That children are the R&D department of the human species. There is pros and cons for that, right? It's great because they show us what the future, but they're also victims of the technologies being created because a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old do not know the impact
and neither do we.
What it does to their brain.
Neither do we. We're experimenting on them.
To a large extent, you're right. And I think when we talk about these fully immersive virtual world in 3D, Charlie, I believe what we've experienced for the last 20 years with social media, the metaverse and virtual world, that's going to be on steroids in terms of the impact on people.
Yeah, I agree. I think that social media has turned out to be, in a way, the killer app of mobile, right? Because, I look at my phone 400 times a day. Why? Nothing has happened in the last 5 minutes. But, although there's a very adorable picture of my granddaughter there.
Look at that.
That's a reason to look at your phone every 5 minutes. But
that is true.
I look at my phone every 5 minutes because I want a dopamine hit. I want an email. I want some other human to connect with me. I want a text. I want a picture of my granddaughter. I'm very greedy for pictures of my granddaughter. And you know what? I get them because my daughter-in-law lives with a phone in her hand. If I look at the phone 400 times a day, she looks at the phone 400 times a day. So very early in my writing about XR, I heard for a speaker named Patty Mays at the MIT Media Lab. And Patty is a professor there and an author and thinks big thoughts about humans and media. So she said, you look at your phone 400 times a day, most kids do also, you are multitasking, right? You're going back and forth between the physical world and the digital world in your palm, right? And it's an unnatural thing, right? Man is meant to look up and out. and therefore you have a reason to bring the display up to the eyes, right? So she was a big proponent of bring the display up to the eyes, take what we're doing in our hand and put it on our head. And I was an acolyte. I was a believer in that for about 5 years. That sort of always on AI, the thing that Roni Abovitz, my podcast co-host, that was his dream for Magic Leap. And but the technology is just not there for see-through AR. Pass-through, where you're using cameras like you do on your smartphone, is certainly there. That's how the Apple Vision Pro works. But it's for see-through is a very, very, very difficult thing to do and continues to be kind of limited, small field of view, difficult to create content for. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with the Vision Pro. I think they're putting a display in the Ray-Bans, which are wonderful, by the way. They look great. They feel great. They sound great. They're trying to do something with the cameras as turn them into sensors. Glasses are a great platform for sensors. It's kind of janky now, but you can see how those glasses could be a platform for AI agents. In fact, you could have the sensors communicating with the AI to provide it context, right? Where am I? What am I doing? Inside, outside, whatever. And the AI could take it from there. In fact, I'm so excited about AI and sensors. I wonder what the display is for, right? Because everything's still going to run off the computer in your phone. It's not going to run off the thing that you're wearing. We're very far away from doing that. So fine, it's going to be running off of my phone. So I've got a pretty big display right here in my hand. So when I need a display, it's in my freaking pocket and I can take it out. The assumption is that when you have AI and sensors that you'll need a display is something that, displays are really hard. And as I said, this is a good display. So
it's not bad.
I think that Patty was wrong. And I think that she's not wrong that looking at your phone 400 times a day is bad. But I think that is the problem, not the fact that it's this device that we look down in our hand. If I could look at it once every 30 minutes, I would be much better off. I mean, that would be a great discipline if I could discipline myself in that way, but I'm not great at disciplining myself in that way.
I think you're saying a lot of smart things around, and by the way, I think we are seeing kind of an initial movement with devices that are not about another display, although the first attempts are not great.
You're talking about Rabbit and the
AI pin for Humane.
Well, the AI pin is about life logging, and we could do that in other ways. I think that Humane kind of got that wrong as a standalone device. But I think wearing a sensor on your body somewhere and having it life log so that at the end of the day, you get a list of all your conversations, all your to-dos.
Yeah, for sure. But it can cost.
You have a fight with your wife and you don't really know what it was about. Now you've got a transcript you can both look on and say, well, how did this escalate, right? So, I mean, a life logging thing is a really, really cool idea.
But it can cost $700. It can cost $700. Yeah.
It doesn't have, I've already got all that technology. I just need a better interface. I've already got all that technology. I think people inventing new standalone things that are going to be better than an Apple phone, I think, are kidding themselves.
There is a great book.
By the way, this thing is what's driving Fortnite and Roblox. Without this thing, there is no Roblox.
It drives most of the biggest consumer interfaces in the world. Like, there's no doubt about that. In China, US, it doesn't really matter.
Correct.
And I would say that there is a great book that Tony Fadell, the inventor of Nest, wrote, which is Build, and he says something really fundamental. And I admit it also as my first company was a computer company, so I built hardware. It's hard. And he said something so good. He said, you need to really be convinced that there's a reason to create hardware, because hardware is difficult and it costs a lot and people need to pay. There needs to be a really, really good reason why you want to build hardware. And with this incredible device and all the amazing capabilities that only getting better, faster in the palm of our hands, there needs to be a really, really strong reason why you build another hardware alongside that.
Yes. Again, I'm starting to waver in my belief in displays for all day, every day wearable compute. However, I still think we haven't even begun to yield the potential and explore the potential of mixed reality, which is both Apple and Meta are exploring. We still need a Game of Thrones kind of hit, right? For mixed reality, where it's like, wow, that is so good that I'm going to go out and buy a headset for whatever cost so that I can experience that. And I think once that happens, and the price is right, like a few $100s, you'll see adoption. The biggest problem we have is not adoption, it's utilization, right?
I agree. And I also
in 2020 and 2021, and to a certain extent in 2022, I spent hours a week in a headset doing social things, teaching classes, playing games, exploring new titles and environments, and talking to people in VR chat. And I spend probably in the last 6 months, I've spent less than 3 hours in a headset.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And then I actually don't think it's a matter of money. People will spend on things if they truly think they're valuable. We've seen it with many, many other devices in the past. Sure, 3,500 is a lot, but I don't think Vision Pro problem was the price. It's just people don't find it useful enough at the moment.
Well, the Vision Pro is a developer kit. Apple really needed to get something in the hands of developers to see what they really had and what the potential of it really was. So why they didn't position it as a prosumer and a developer kit and discourage regular people from buying it, I don't know. And I think it must be because to Apple, is a hammer and everything looks like a nail. It's like, oh, we know how to launch a new product. And the machine just went to work to make sure that there wasn't a person on the face of the earth that didn't hear about the Vision Pro.
Let's actually switch gears quickly, Charlie. Great. And I want to ask you the last question, which is, what is the thing you're most excited about for the next 12 months?
Generative AI, the potential of AI to hallucinate movies, the potential of AI to give creators around the world a way to create art that they never had the tools or the money or the time to create before. And it gives creative people a way to use words to create content so that I'm not limited by the fact that I can't draw.
Interesting.
So I'm really excited about that. I think AI, as I said, is going to be, I never thought I would see a wealth creation opportunity like the internet again in my lifetime. I think mobile, maybe. And I missed mobile. I was busy doing other things. And I really didn't think through at that time while I was busy doing creative things, the scale of the impact that mobile would have.
Yeah.
As I said, it put a rocket sled under the internet. The internet was waiting to be mobile. And of course, this thing, the iPhone changed the world. Right. We always knew computers were going to get smaller and smaller. I never thought it would get this small.
No, and in that vein, certainly ChatGPT is a certain iPhone moment for AI.
Yeah. So I think that it's a very disruptive moment. We don't know exactly what the impact is going to be, other than it is going to be profound. I will tell you, as a writer, it has really helped me. It does a great first draft. You rewrite it, of course. But now when I'm writing a story, if I was going to write a story on Super Social, and I should, it would be a combination of feeding press and your press releases and my interview with you into ChatGPT and very precise instructions about what I think is important, what should be included, what the tone of the story should be. And it will churn out a first draft, which is probably superior to what my would have been. And I go back through it. It's like, oh, it's in the wrong order. Oh, I see a better way to structure this. Oh, don't put that in there. Put this in there. And I can write the whole story in an hour instead of 3 hours.
Yeah.
Now, did AI write that story? No, I wrote that story. I touched every word before it was published. So no, you can't say that AI wrote it, but you can say this amazing tool took 3 hours of work and made it 1 hour of work. Yeah. And the quality is the same. Now, and by the way, a human did it. AI could not have done that without my prompt and without my deciding what content it needed and gathering that content up. So it's a machine that it helps you do the low value part of your job, right? Writing the first draft is like, look, just integrate all this shit into 1,000-word.
No, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating point of view.
So I
very...
mean, the impact of it, and that's just a dumb little example from my own very limited experience. But think about that on a manufacturing scale.
Yeah.
Right. So if it could save you 30% of the time it takes to manufacture a car, that would completely change the world. Right. And so,
Charlie, no, I think I love what you're saying about AI. I think we should spend a whole bunch of time just talking about AI.
All right, we'll have a sequel. We'll have a sequel podcast.
We'll have a sequel, exactly. And I'm coming on your show as well in the next couple of months, which I'm very excited about. And I forgot you're hosting it with Ronnie, who I never met. So I'm very excited to do this podcast with you and with him.
Ronnie is an interesting guy who knows a lot about a lot. Obviously people are interested in what he has to say. So it's been huge having him as a podcast partner for the past 2 years. I mean, Ted and I had a nice podcast, but now it's really picking up momentum because Ronnie is famous to people like us.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's super helpful. Very hard to get through the noise, even with podcasts. But hey, Charlie, thank you so much. I've had a great time. Really enjoyed hearing about your story.
My pleasure.
And there's definitely going to be a sequel.
Okay, I'm ready anytime.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Into the Metaverse. We hope you learned a lot and explored new aspects of the metaverse.